Hi, Kate. Thanks for joining me today. Happy holidays.
Hey, Christine. Happy holidays. It's great to be with you today.
It's great to be with you too. I especially appreciate it's last day before break. So thank you for coming on. I'm so excited to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, of course. I'm getting ready for the holidays. I wish I could tell you that my shopping was done, but it's not. But we're getting there.
I was thrilled when we connected and you agreed to come on the program. I shared with you a little bit. My goal is to share the lessons learned from powerhouse women in tech who have been doing amazing work. And I've been so impressed with you. We crossed paths about a decade ago now when you were
Yeah.
working at a startup in the Boston area. And I've seen the gradual progression, not gradual, the skyrocketing of your career. You're now working as a senior vice president at Quickbase, a senior vice president of marketing and chief of staff for the CMO at Quickbase. Through the progression in your career, I expect there's so much we could learn from you. So to start, can you, and this is the hardest question I'll ask, in essence, tell me the story of your life in a couple of minutes, but can you tell us a little bit about your life and career trajectory?
Yeah, sure. 100%. Let's see. So my career, I was really fortunate when I graduated college, there were no jobs. And it took me like a full year to find, nobody was hiring entry level folks. We were in a recession. So you could get people with experience for a good return on your dollar there. So I was going up against people who had a real experience, and I was fresh out of college. I had very little internship experience. So, anyways, I landed at this healthcare publishing company. I just knew I wanted to do marketing. And so I landed at this healthcare publishing company, this niche business that was based in this beautiful seaside town called Marblehead, Massachusetts, above a boat building shop. And it was actually founded by a woman who had started writing these medical billing newsletters at her kitchen table. She was literally typing them out on a typewriter, and they were helping healthcare billing folks stay up on the latest regulations. And it turned out to be a multi-million-dollar business. And so landed there. I was at the very bottom of the barrel. I was like, I pretty much would have done anything that they would have asked me to do if they promised to employ me. Started out and was making $22,000 a year. And I was doing double-sided data entry and filing actual physical direct mail pieces in a filing cabinet, which is like so antiquated today. I was so fortunate to start there because it was literally like a trampoline for the rest of my career. And so I got to do every single facet of marketing over the course of my 7 years with that company. It started out again, super back office. What was really mops at that time, but that wasn't really a thing. But then from there, I went and started to do email marketing, and I was the person who was running our email marketing platform. And then from there, I became a copywriter, and God bless the woman who hired me as a copywriter because my copywriting skills at that time were terrible, but she took a chance on me. So this company was founded by a woman. And then I was just fortunate to have so many women leaders within this company that just took a bet on me. And I stayed curious. I don't know. Throughout that time, we were in publishing has been dying for the 50 years, I think. We were trying to figure out how to take the print newsletters that we were creating and put them online for resource centers. And that's where I fell in love with tech. And I was like, I don't know what this thing is, but man, I am crazy about it. It is fascinating to me, this concept of the internet and being able to put content there. And it was like paywall. We would debate paywalls back and forth for days and days. That's where I fell in love with tech. And so from there, I had to make the really tough decision after starting at the very bottom. I was second in line to the CMO of that company. It was okay. I don't know what I'm doing, but like I'm 29. I'm not going to be a CMO. So I got to, of this multi-million-dollar private equity backed company. So I got to go figure out this tech thing.
Yeah, I did want to ask you because that's a major shift. You loved this position. You worked your way up. You learned the ropes in marketing. You're 7 years in. How did you make the call that it was time to move on? It does sound like it's either I'm a CMO here or it's time to leave. You weren't ready for that. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I was definitely not ready for that. And I also was just so in love with tech. And I was
Mm-hmm.
just like, I just was so curious about it. I had to go figure it out. And
Okay.
so I went to work for this online education company, and it was really awesome. That's where, Christine, that led me from one tech company to the next. And I even got to work in product. I think when you and I crossed paths, it's where I like to say I got my free MBA. I was running product and marketing for a Series A startup. At that time, I did 3 stops on the Series A startup, free 1 million in revenue. And man, it was really fun. That's really where I got to understand managing a P&L and L and
Mhm.
managing board and managing investors and just going out and making things get done there. That was really fun. And I learned so much.
I
Um,
remember when we met then, it was around the 2015 period, I believe, when you
yeah,
were working at the Series A. I don't know if you recall this, but I'd be curious because I hear this from a lot of women in tech. You were leading up product and you were leading up marketing. I do recall we were starting to have a conversation. You were looking for what was next. And you were sharing that your heart and passion was still in the marketing world and you were
yeah.
looking for more of those marketing exec leadership roles. You made that call. You were leading up both product and marketing, but you made a choice. And I'm
Yeah.
curious, what was your thought process? That seems like it was an inflection point for you. You could have gone multiple ways.
That was a big one, actually. You're totally right. And it was, I could have kept going down the product path, but what made me fall in love with marketing at the start was the ability that you have as a marketer to change someone's mind
Mm-hmm.
through hitting them with the right message at the right time and making them trust you. And creating the power that a great brand can create and the value of what that does for its employees, what it does for its customers. I don't know about you, I'm a huge Apple lover, right? And if you want to see the value of a brand, think about Apple and Dell technically do the same thing. They sell the same thing. They sell computers and they both sell headphones, they both sell monitors. But man, like Apple just has I love it. And I just fell in love with that, Christine. I was like, I gotta go
Yeah.
figure that piece out, you
I
know?
don't hear a lot of people when they're getting their Dell PC, just the delight as
Yeah.
they're
There's no
opening the
unboxing for
package.
the
No,
Dell, right?
no,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. Not trying to bash Dell today, but I hear what you're saying, Kate, in terms of the Apple products. It's about the emotional experience to a large extent.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was a big inflection point for me. So I just had to go figure that out. From there, I
Mhm.
went and ran revenue marketing for a company called Smart Bear, which is Boston based. And that was a whole different scale. It was $100 million business. So I went from Series A to $100 million joining that and got to work with a super talented CMO and Brian Temple who gave me a really long leash and always knew when to pull me back in and really helped me a ton in making sure that my voice got heard. He was a big advocate for me in that business, and it was just I'm really lucky to have worked for him. And so I went from Smart Bear, and we had a great run there, and then went to Drift, which was a fun startup. I joined at 25 million and left at 65, and got to build demand gen and revenue marketing there, and that included the SDR function at Drift. And that was really fun. I got to like see hyper growth, and I learned a ton from David Cancel and Elias Torres, the founders of that company. And that was a blast. I had so much fun. But then I knew I wanted to go run all of marketing. And so went up to bigger, ran all of marketing for a company called Validity. And then from there, I landed at Quickbase, where I run revenue marketing, chief of staff to the CMO, as you mentioned there. So
Yeah.
it's been a blast. Yeah.
A blast and a varied career as well. I
Yeah.
have so much I want to ask you. Let's first start with lessons learned, but just the story you had, the market as it is today. I'm hearing from a lot of candidates, both on the product side, the design side, and the marketing side, trying to find out what's next and take the leap in their careers. And you talked about this period shifting from Series A, running product and marketing, to moving to a much larger business and overseeing a much larger aspect of the revenue. And I'm
Yeah.
curious, people are struggling with what they're hearing in this market is to get that next position, you have to have that comparable experience, shown you've done it before. You
Mm.
have taken leaps at certain points. How did you get there? Was it through comparable experience, your network, connections? Like, how do people make that leap?
That's such a good question. I know, and I hear that, and there's the great debate of people want to hire somebody who's seen the movie before, but if you never
Yeah,
get that ticket, how do you get into the movie theater? You know what I mean? Like, how are you supposed to do that? And so it's
absolutely.
such a good question. And really, one, my network was huge. So
Yeah.
actually, how I got into Drift was through Nish Murthy, who at that time I used to call him my work husband. We did one of the Series A's together and
Mhm.
then broke apart. He went over to Klaviyo. I went to Smart Bear. And then from Klaviyo, he went to Drift. He's super smart. person. And he called me up and he said, hey, I think they're looking for demand gen here. You should come over. Drift is another great example of a great brand. Like they just did brand really well. And so I had fallen in love with that brand. So I was a fangirl when I joined the company. And so the network was a huge component there. And then I think you're asking such a good question around like, how do I make these decisions? I think part of it is I just find really interesting puzzles to go work
Yeah.
on. You know what I mean? And by the way, I'm not advocating that anybody else take this tack because maybe I'm doing it all wrong. But because I was just talking with Brian the other day. Okay, you're at this million. Okay, go be a CMO at a smaller like stage company and then go work your way up because that is how
Mhm.
investors and lending partners look at the business. But I also just think, man, I just want to work with great people. Like sometimes I have made decisions where it was like, okay, great, I could go run all of marketing for a $200 million company, and that's amazing. And when I made that decision, I didn't make it based on the people are awesome and I
Mhm.
love what they do and I understand innately, I believe what they're selling is Tylenol and not a vitamin. Like
Yeah.
when I have made that decision, it didn't work out for me. Do you know what I mean? I've
Absolutely.
gotten sold on, and this is not the case with my current employer, but like, hey, come join and we're going to do a recap. And that's going to happen like in the next X number of months. And like
Mhm.
the recap, the sell, the this, the that, it's always going to happen until it doesn't, right? Until for us, it was like the day Russia invaded Ukraine, or it was like, it's always going to happen until it doesn't. And so make sure that you are really in love with the work. Do you know what I mean? And not the promise of what is going to come, the work and the people.
Such excellent advice, Kate. And this may be also anticipating what I was going to ask you next. Like, one of my goals is I've mentioned this to you with your long and varied and fun career, finding things you love to do. I'm wondering, seeing where you are now, if you could go back in time during that period where you were spending a year looking for that first job, talking to
Yeah.
that version of you, based on everything you've learned, what are one or two things you'd tell that version of you? And this is a hard question because you've learned so much over the years, but where would you start?
One is I would tell that person, man, it is all going to be okay. It is all going to be okay. I think that
Doesn't feel that way, right?
yeah, when I think about that person, it was like, I was just hustling. I was just like, okay, whatever you want me to do. You want me to enter these codes from this system into this system? That sounds brain numbing, but I will do it like anything. I remember like I was at work until 11 o'clock one night doing that. It's just like grinding it out. And for many years, Christine, I think that person, that like hamster wheel person was within me. And I didn't enjoy the journey, I think, as
Yeah.
much as I could have. I didn't enjoy the journey. And so that's why I say, man, it's going to be okay. Take a deep breath, lift your
Yeah.
head up, look around, enjoy. I had thought to myself, like, oh, I'll be happy when I am a manager, when I'm a senior manager, when I'm a director, when I'm a VP. And I got to all those places and I wasn't happy. I was just like, I just then started looking up again. And it was like, oh, I got to go do that. And none of that made me happier. Do you know what I mean? It didn't do that. And so just take a deep breath, enjoy the journey, and know it's all going to be okay. I'm not saying put your feet up and don't work hard. I'm just saying
Yeah.
take a
Yeah.
minute.
That's a theme. Thank you for that advice for yourself and for us. It's a theme that's been coming up with women who I've been talking about who aren't at the start of their career. They're very senior level. And unfortunately, a theme that's still coming up women at the VP level or higher in tech hitting this point where they're still on the hamster wheel and they're not taking that breath and they're asking themselves, is this where I should be? Or you said take a breath, but have you ever felt that way? You mentioned as you've gone up the ladder, there were points where you've been having a blast, but points where you were like, this isn't all I want to
Yeah.
be doing or being. And if so, like, how did you approach finding more of your whole being, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it totally does. It's something I've been thinking a lot about and over the last few years and probably as a midlife crisis, but I've spent a lot of time
I've
thinking
been
about this
there.
actually. I was fortunate enough last week to go to the Massachusetts Conference for Women and it was my first time I'd ever been there. It was their 20th year So I'm embarrassed to say that it's been going on for 20 years and it was my first time. But Oprah was there and she was speaking. Oprah, Caitlin Clark, like the lineup, Beverly Johnson, the lineup of speakers at this event was like astounding. The governor of Massachusetts, all these things. One of the things Oprah said was she just names it really better than I could. So that's why I'm going here, was just you need to listen to your inner voice, right? And so many times I have heard my voice and I've let external voices come in and be louder than it. And so somebody else's perception of me is louder than my own inner voice. Like I have also this inner voice that is the monkey part of my brain is you're never enough, you're not enough. And so, but like my inner voice, like the true inner voice that I believe that Oprah was talking about, knows my value, knows my worth, and knows what I am capable of. But I always have that other thing on my shoulder saying, you're not enough, you can't do this. They're going to find out you're an imposter. They're going to find out you're a fraud. They're going to find out you can't do it. And that is constantly going on. And I think one of the things about that is like really listening to that inner voice. Like in those times when I was like, hey, I probably made the wrong decision. I'm not in the right thing. It was like, yeah, I should have, this has been going off in me for a long time. And so like, how do I get that out there and just let that guide me more? I think people talk about it as like women's intuition. There's just an inner knowing. And I think I think you have to make more room and space to listen to it.
Yeah, I so appreciate that, Kate. And thank you for sharing, because this is something a lot of us are feeling, and sharing the thoughts that go in your head, these notions of not feeling good enough. I've felt that and heard that as well. And part of what I've had a challenge with, and I know other women in tech, the tech industry is challenging. And especially for women to figure out how to navigate, continue to achieve and rise, but figure out their place in the world. And one thing about that voice that's coming from external sources, that a constant theme I'm hearing from women in tech, women who are excelling, is that they don't want to, but they're still getting validation from the external world. And sometimes the external world of tech doesn't give you the validation you want or need. And it does come back to what you're saying, having your strong inner voice, knowing who you are, knowing that your value is not aligned with what others or the world think. I really appreciate your perspective. And I hadn't shared yet, but the motivation and driver, we met 10 years ago. We just recently reconnected when I reached out to you, because you recently wrote a post on LinkedIn that was taking, a lot of us know the Barbie monologue, but taking the Barbie monologue, but tailoring the message to women in tech. And when I read this post, I thought, you are seeing me. And I know a lot of other women felt the same way. And I hoped you would be willing to share your post, and then we could talk about it a little bit. I'd love to have you share it, and then we'll talk about what prompted you to write it.
Yeah, sure. 100%. Let me give it a read. Started out by saying I'm trying to execute on some non-work ideas I had. I've been thinking about creating a version of the Barbie monologue and tailored for women in tech. Check it out. Do you identify with it? What I get right or wrong? And it starts out with, it is literally impossible to be a woman working in tech today. You are so smart, so capable, so effective, and yet it kills me that you don't think you're good enough. Because no matter how extraordinary you are, it feels like somehow you're always doing it wrong. You have to be a leader, but don't let anyone know you're leading them. Lead from the back. You can't say you want to be the boss because that's pushy. Good work will speak for itself, except it doesn't. You have to deliver results, but you can't ask for resources because times are tight. You have to have confidence, but not too much confidence, because then you're bragging. You have to lead, but you better ask for things nicely or else you're a bitch. You have to be empathetic, but hold people to high standards or else you're a pushover. You have to be assertive, but not too assertive. And don't forget to think about everyone else. And when the men around you behave badly, just let it go. Use it as fuel, because you're calling it out. You calling it out means they'll have to start watching what they say around you, or worse, treat you equally. You should always look good, but not too good, because nobody likes a try hard. but not bad either because it's just a little effort, right? Even if the schedule gives you 20 minutes between a team building 5K and a board meeting. And don't forget to be grateful. Always be grateful. Grateful to the men who made sure your ideas were heard. Grateful to the men who let you shine. Grateful because no one wants to hear about how you actually got here. You have to never be rude, never be demanding, never be too confident, never be emotional, but also never be cold. Never be too loud, never too quiet. You're failing at work and somehow you're still disappointing everyone at home. I am so tired of watching myself and every other woman meet a higher standard and still not get what we deserve. I am so tired of seeing us do everything right and still have to fight for what should already be ours. If this is how it is for us now, with everything we fought for, what will it look like for our daughters?
Thank you. Thank you, Kate. So we had not connected in years, and somehow the magic of the LinkedIn algorithm brought this to my feed. And it stopped me, and I know it stopped many others. I think it has like 100 plus likes, a bunch of comments. Can you speak to what motivated you? This isn't something you just write on a whim in the morning. Like, there was so much intent put into this post. And can you talk a little bit about that? What motivated it? You've been in the world of tech for so long, but what was driving your writing and what were you hoping to achieve?
Yeah, 100%. What was driving it was really it was not about one interaction or one meeting or one employer or one it wasn't about that. It was like this journey of 20 years. It was about what motivated it, quite frankly, was a little bit of me listening to my inner voice. Christine, I can't remember when the Barbie movie came out like 2 years ago. I had this thought of producing something like this then, but the grinder in me, the rise and grind, the like I dedicated employee, the like this is what it is in me said didn't prioritize that. So when I started that post, what I said was like, hey, I'm trying to do some non-work stuff. Like I'm trying to work on something else other than pipeline forecast and the next campaign and the next planning and how we're going to do that and all the things. Like I needed to make some space for something else and that creativity because I do think there's something else within me that is really interested in how we can empower women in tech and share that journey and talk about it. Because a lot of the times when I talk to other women in tech, they all acknowledge that this is the reality. They all acknowledge that they've had similar experiences. They all identify this with this, but like they're just like, yeah, that is what it is. But they're like gonna go, and it's like, what if you make space for talking about this? What if you make the space or the intention to acknowledge it and help each other and help other women in the room? I think a lot of times, I've had experience. I'm sure we all have. I've had experiences with women where it's like you can tell she thinks it's a zero-sum game. It's like me or her, which by the way, she's not really always wrong. So it's a zero-sum game. So one of us has to win and one of us has to lose. By the way, I'm sure there have been times when I have behaved this way too. So let me just own that. But what if we didn't act like that? What if we saw it as an infinite game and that we could all make it there? And so instead we started to amplify one another and help one another. And so that was really the motivation or the thought behind it.
I felt from your post, and I don't know, I don't want to judge it. I thought it shouldn't have to be this way. But when I saw your post, I found it to be really brave. And one of the reasons I'd say, like I said, I wish it wasn't this way, that it felt like something that was brave publicly putting it out there. It's true, and we all believe it's true from a female perspective. I've been talking with many women leaders about coming on and talking about their lessons learned. And several of them have said, you know what, I'd love to, and not yet, because they're on a career trajectory where they're executives at their company and they're feeling hesitancy to come out and speak to their lessons learned as a woman in tech. And frankly, I get it, but I wish it wasn't that way, that many of the women I've talked to are just still going along and hoping they get to a point in their career where it won't matter to them as much, the persona they're presenting. But I think when I first reached out to you, Kate, I know this. I asked you, Was there any fear putting this out there? And I think I'll let you answer. How were you feeling when you hit publish to this?
I have so many thoughts to what you just said. The yes ands to that. A couple of things. So to answer your question directly, how I felt when I pressed publish was, it actually goes back to the second lesson. Like I told you,
Yeah.
the other lesson I would have told 21-year-old me was like, take a breath, take a beat. It's all going to be okay. The second one would be like, get vulnerable, which is not ever a place that I have been able to operate from. And why I say that is that is what it felt like when I hit publish on that. It just felt, oh man, now I'm sending this thing out to a bunch of strangers and who knows who's going to see this. And I think about that. I'm like, my intent of that is not to be man hating. That's not my intent. Like I've said it even in this interview, I was super lucky to work with folks, so many men throughout my career that have helped me tremendously. It's not man hating. It's not. So when I hit publish on, I was like, oh man, I hope one, that my intent on this is clear, and two, that wow, it feels so vulnerable. What's the world going to say back to this? Yeah. But it felt like a risk worth taking. But I got plenty of feedback similar to what you had said, private messages from women who were like, man, I really want to reshare your post. I really want to like it. I really want to comment on it, but I am in the midst of a job search and I'm afraid of what employers will think about my doing that. One of the things that you also said, Christine, reminds me of this quote from Veep, the show on HBO. Julia Louis-Dreyfus, she plays the vice president. It's absolutely hysterical, but when she starts running for the candidate as president, there's a quote that she has in the show, which is like, oh, what somebody suggests, maybe you talk about your plight as a woman. She's like, I can't talk about that. People hate those. It's so interesting. It's so interesting. I can't be on a woman in tech podcast because I don't want to draw attention to the fact that I'm a woman in tech. It's interesting. And I think one of the things you were leading me into is the other thing I thought was like, I just am at a point where I want to try something different. I've gotten here, but what happens if I really put it all out on the field and all out on the line and like really like, this is the whole me. And I have been lucky enough to get feedback that's from people that's, man, you're so real. You're so out there. And I admire that about you. But I'm sure there's plenty of people who are like, I could use a little less too. I don't know.
Your approach though, Kate, seeing how far you've come in your career, skyrocketing in your career, bringing your whole self, and you spoke to vulnerability and authenticity. I'm sure you feel the same way. What could you achieve with that? And given how far you've already come, there's something really there. I think a lot of people, back to external validation from the world, a lot of people are seeing how the world operates in tech, and it's not a tech industry of everyone bringing their whole selves to the work. I think over time, more and more people will be. I'm sure you're seeing this too, but I suspect that's the hesitancy, that the tech world isn't always saying, yay, you, Kate. Thank you for putting that out. Or maybe they did. What was the feedback? Yeah. We talked about you got some positive responses behind the scenes. Some people posted, but were you getting responses from your colleagues in the tech world that were positive, or what were you hearing?
I got a lot of positive feedback. I think the negative feedback, quite frankly, I'm sure people have thought it, but haven't said it to me. Do you know what I mean? But I think for every person that was out there being like, wow, that's really brave, they're also thinking, wow, I can't believe you did that. Do you know what I mean? There's the other side of that. But look, my intention around that is just really clear. It's not man-hating. It's just an experience. Do you know what I mean? And I think tech has come, man, we've come such a long way, but there's still so much work to do. And so I'm not, where we are doesn't diminish any of the work that we've done to get here. People have told me like, what throughout, it's like, people have told me, I think we are really good for like, our company is really good at X or Y, or we're much better than a lot of other tech companies. Is okay, what does that mean? Just because we're better doesn't mean we're great. And so we should always want to push ourselves to be better. It's like, I'm not as racist as my neighbor. Yeah, but you're still racist. So we got to get better at it. We all have to improve every day.
How do you think, back to after you read your post, you talked a little bit, you spoke to women lifting other women up, women boosting each other up. I know you've been spending a lot of time thinking about how to advocate for women. As you've been thinking through that, for the women, they don't have to be in tech, but for the women in tech who are thinking about how do I boost up and lift up other women, do you have any recommendations for them? Like, how are you thinking we as a community can come together to get to a new place in the tech world?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is about coming together. And I know that we've talked about this, Christine, and like I admire so much about what you're doing because I think what you're doing is a big component of what needs to be done, which is like hearing other women's stories. Sometimes when you pull something out of the darkness and shine a light on it, okay, cool. Then we can be really clear about let's go improve that and let's go, you know what I mean? And let's get better and let's really talk about it and talk about how we can improve it. But
Mm-hmm.
if we're just like, if you have women in tech who are just like, I can't go on a women in
Yeah.
tech show. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to, like, some women have said to me, like, oh yeah, like I have that problem. There have been times in meetings, and I'm sure many folks have felt this, where my voice isn't heard. And I know this is true.
Yeah.
I know other people have felt it because one of the comments on that post, you forgot this part where you have an idea, you just say your idea, not super loud, but loud enough that another man can hear it. So then he can say that's his idea and you can tell him that's a great idea. I've talked to other women and said, this is a challenge for me. And they're like, oh yeah, you just have to find a guy to come up and back you up and then your idea gets heard. And it was like, oh, we should be okay with that being the solution. Do you know,
Yeah.
I should find a translator? That doesn't seem to make sense.
And I'll share with you behind the scenes, I've been running small councils with women leaders and talking about how they get to the next level or actually pivot out of tech. They're trying to figure out what's next. And there have been honest discussions where we've talked about in concept. Sure, women, we can boost each other up. If we come together and work as a collective unit, only good things will happen. There's been some days where the women in the council start thinking about, well, and there are systemic barriers in place, and there are certain groups that do have more of the power. There's the how might we boost each other up, but also dealing with and being realistic about the systemic barriers. And it's not just for women, obviously. Many of these women, senior in tech, know how privileged they are and what they're receiving, but it's figuring out how do we work as a collective unit to move forward, but also recognize that the barriers aren't going away tomorrow.
The barriers aren't going away tomorrow. And also, I don't see them as barriers. I just see them as hurdles. I don't, there's nothing you can't overcome. It just takes you a little bit longer to come it. And I don't think leaving tech is the answer.
Yeah.
I'm sure some women have had much different experience than I, but I don't think leaving's the answer either, because then it's definitely never going to get better. So, but I think the answer is sharing our experiences together, sharing some of the strategies and the tactics, which like that was what one of those women was doing. Like her tactic is finding a partner to help amplify her message. Okay, let's share those with one another and keep going. When the suffragettes were trying to get the right to vote, they weren't like, hey, this isn't going to work. I don't know. We got to go over to start our own country. You know what I mean? They were like, no, we got to keep going. And that's what we got to do.
Thank you, Kate. And thank you for all of your wisdom today and all of your lessons learned. I learned so much, and I know my listeners will as well. Thank you so much. I so appreciated it.
Christine, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm so glad that we were able to reconnect and really consider myself lucky that you asked me to do this. So thank you so much.